All right, Kate. This is Jack Stockwell. Welcome to Global Affairs Unfiltered here live on Facebook and X, and to the illustrious K-Talk audience at AM 1640, Sandy Salt Lake, Ogden. You're listening to Jack Stockwell, me. And I was asked over the weekend, aren't you going to do any of these 20-minute things? Because there's daily things that occur. Yeah, I have a couple of crises that I'm personally taking care of at the moment. And as a result, I haven't been able to give it the time that I want. But I will in the days that are ahead of us here. So welcome to Monday morning, the 3rd of February 2025, and a very important week this will be. An extremely important week. One of the most important, probably the most important week since the election. And that's because the two people who are most likely to help expose, reveal the deep state will get their votes from the Senate this week. And I'm sorry, I've come so ill-prepared this morning. I had the names and the numbers of the four possible Republican Senate committee members, or even in the Senate itself when it goes to the Senate for the full vote, that might impede the selection of Patel and Tulsi Gabbard. So I want to put this in context for you. I don't know how familiar you are with Tulsi Gabbard's presentation to the Intelligence Committee. And because of an earlier statement sometime last fall by Chuck Schumer, when he said, you don't want to go against the Intelligence Committee because the Intelligence Committee will come after you 6 ways from Sunday. Well, that's kind of scary. That's kind of scary if you're a member of the Senate and your hands aren't 100% clean. You might have some reason to fear the intelligence community. And in the preceding administration, if you had had any behaviors that I don't know why, I was just told that there is dead air at K-Talk. I see. Yeah. Well, forgive me, those of you who are on the stream. Let me tell him I notice the recording is not picking up Zoom. There you go. Picking up Zoom. All right, I'm sorry, everybody. We'll just have to try to get some kind of connection here. I really want to do a professional show for you. I know I'm coming across on the stream. Yeah, there's several of you on the stream right now. I'm just trying to connect here with K-Talk, and I am in communication with Paul, trying to find out what, I'm just waiting for Paul to get back to me. But those of you who are listening here on the stream, let me tell him here, just please be patient. There. So I just have to wait and see. He may want me to reconnect. He's going to try and find out what the problem is. Sometimes when I am, I'm at home. I'm in my house doing this live Zoom. I want to go exclusively to Zoom. I mean, X and stream. I want to do exclusively stream. And I don't know how to get a lot of the K-Talk listeners over. Sometime you just have to make that move. And with no exceptions or apologies or anything else. So hopefully Paul's trying to figure this out as I again check and see here. Nope, I'm not broadcasting at K-Talk. There, I hope the guys didn't turn off the mics in the studio. Exactly, Paul. Yes, exactly. See, so what do I do at this point? I am, S-T-R-A-M-I-N-G, streaming. And the stream numbers continue to increase, so thank you for your patience. I'll get back here to Tulsi and Cash Patel in a moment. But I just want to make sure that everything's done for the benefit of K-Talk. Because as I said, as I started the program, this could be the most important week since the election. And I think we're supposed to know by Tuesday or Wednesday. I think they're still debating the issue. And the issue is, as I was saying there earlier, I keep looking at my phone here to see what Paul has to say. And I don't see any comments, so we're fine. Let's just keep going. No, what do I do at this point? Yes, no. I don't know what no means. What do I do at this point? I am streaming. New. Oh, on. So, all right, one last thing here. I don't know what to do at this. All right. You think that'll work? Let's try that. Let me see here if it's recording. Let's see if, yeah, oh yeah, okay. All right, we can, all right, Paul. There was some strange thing that needed to take place. 13 minutes after the top of the hour, and now I am streaming as well as on K-Talk. Then all the regular people wanting to know if there's a show today. This is typical for Monday morning. I'm sorry, at K-Talk. It's just typical for Monday morning. Some computers have to be restarted or whatever. Thank goodness for Paul Jensen. As much as Kristen does what she does and Dick does what he does, without Paul, there wouldn't be K-Talk, at least from my limited point of view. So I'll just go on from here and get back to what I was talking about as far as the immediacy of this moment that this Senate committee passes the nominations and sends it on to the Senate for their consent role. Primarily, the Senate is there for what? To advise and consent, to advise the other houses or the other branches of government, and to give consent where they're supposed to give consent, one of which is, and this is part of the brilliance of the founders in the checks and balances system, that the president can't just autocratically fill his cabinet with who he wants without the consent of 100 other votes, the majority of 100 other votes, and the number that consisted of the majority. Now it's a simple majority. It's been different over the years, but I think it's the democratic rules that have it where it is right now. So it's coming back at them. Anyway, I want to set the stage here because I don't know if you listened to Tulsi Gabbard's presentation, but it was her opening statement. And, before President Trump got rid of DEI, I would have to call her a statesperson. Now I can call her a stateswoman, without fear of retribution from the intelligence community. I'll refer to as the IC a number of times. And I am going to read to you a very abridged form of her opening statement to the Senate Select Committee on intelligence. I think it was Thursday. And I just want you to listen to the kind of person that could be at the very heart and center of the intelligence that gets to the president. Because if you're like me, you have this extremely sneaky suspicion the president isn't getting good advice. And when he makes some of the comments about China that he does, he's listening too closely to Rubio. And when he makes some of the comments that he has about Putin and the Ukraine, especially the current numbers, the battle numbers, the dead numbers, the armed, everything else regarding NATO's war against Russia, numbers that are just absolutely ridiculous, not substantiated by any good intelligence at all. In fact, it's the other side that he should be talking about. For instance, he's talking about 1 million casualties of the Russians, when in just the last 3 months, the Ukrainians have over 150,000 dead, over 50,000 November, 50,000 December, and over 50,000 January. That's almost 3 times in 3 months the total dead of America in the Vietnam War over 10 years. Well, not the Vietnam War, but our presence in Vietnam. The war wasn't that long. So anyway, I'm going to read this to you. Just ask you to sit back and listen, concentrate on what I'm saying, and I want you to imagine yourself sitting beside Tulsi Gabbard while she's doing this. And imagine how you would feel sitting next to her at this table in front of the Senate Select Committee, half of which probably have the thumb of the intelligence community on them right now, because these people are running scared. I mean, for example, I know I'm all over the place. I'll try to focus here, but Fauci. Why would Fauci have any reason to worry about anything if he hadn't been pre-pardoned? You'll notice that the president, the former president, Biden, didn't pre-pardon a whole lot of intelligence community people. And they're worried about this. They're worried about this because they know Russiagate and the crimes that were committed in promoting Russiagate is going to come back on them. And what they want is another patsy sitting there at the head of the Department of Intelligence, the DNI that Gabbard is going to get into, the Director of National Intelligence. And as a result, if they can get a patsy in there like they've had all along, charges could be brought against Brennan, charges could be brought against Clapper, charges could be brought against Milley, a whole bunch of these people, but they know nothing will ever happen. The same thing with the crash of 2008, when Obama was coming into office. And we know the principal characters. They were revealed in Senate hearings that caused the crash, or not caused or orchestrated, but were instrumental in not stopping it, were never prosecuted. And then the involvement of the United States in the overthrow of Gaddafi in 2011, and the crimes that were committed then in the name of NATO, but American intelligence involved. No one was ever prosecuted for that. Oh, geez, I did it again. Hold it just a second. I just need to get here. Stop that and take this to manual. There's so many things involved in trying to coordinate the two broadcasts at the same time, start the K-Talk broadcast off correctly. Sometimes I get lost. Okay, I've jabbered here long enough. I want to read this to you. Just imagine yourself sitting beside Tulsi Gabbard and looking at half of the Senate Select Committee looking at her with pride, and the other half looking at her not evilishly, but scared to death that she could actually get into this position. I'm honored and grateful to President Trump for his trust and confidence in nominating me to serve our country as the Director of National Intelligence at a time when trust in the intelligence community is at an all-time low. Chuck Schumer admitted, you take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. What a statement from the Senate Majority Leader for the last 4 years. For too long, faulty, inadequate, or weaponized intelligence have led to costly failures and the determining undermining of our national security and God-given freedoms enshrined in the Constitution. The most obvious example is our invasion of Iraq based on a total fabrication or complete failure of intelligence. This disastrous decision led to the deaths of tens of thousands of American soldiers and millions of people in the Middle East, mass migration, destabilization, and undermining of the security and stability of our European allies. The rise of ISIS, the strengthening of al-Qaeda and other Islamist jihadist groups, and the strengthening of Iran. Here are just a few examples. The American people elected Donald Trump as their president, but the FBI and intelligence agencies were politicized by his opponents to undermine his presidency and falsely portray him as a puppet of Putin. Title I of FISA was used to illegally obtain a warrant to spy on Trump campaign advisor Carter Page using a Clinton campaign-funded false dossier as their so-called evidence. This is why they're scared, that she may bring this out into the light of day. Goes on here. She goes on. Biden campaign advisor Tony Blinken was the impetus for the 51 former senior intelligence officials' letter dismissing Hunter Biden's laptop as disinformation to help Biden win the election. And you've seen the reports on that, that had that not happened at the very last minute, Trump may have been able to get past the fraud that was being committed at the time. Former DNI James Clapper lied to this committee in 2013, denying the existence of programs that facilitated the mass collection of millions of Americans' phone and internet records, yet was never held responsible. Under John Brennan's leadership, the CIA abused its power to spy on Congress to dodge oversight, lied about doing it until he was caught, yet was never held responsible. You think Clapper and Brennan are shaking in their boots? Under Biden, the FBI abused its power for political reasons to surveil Catholics who attend traditional Latin Mass, labeling them as radical traditionalist Catholics. Just 24 hours after I criticized the Kamala Harris and her nomination, I was placed on a secret domestic terror watch list called Quiet Skies. Unfortunately, there are many more examples. President Trump's re-election is a clear mandate from the American people to break this cycle of failure, end the weaponization, politicization of the IC, and begin to restore trust in those who have been charged with the critical task of securing our nation. I enlisted in the Army because of the horrific terrorist attacks on September 11th, 2001, and volunteered to deploy to Iraq in 2005, where I served in a medical unit. After nearly 22 years in uniform with 3 combat deployments to the Middle East and Africa, I am now a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, where I serve as a battalion commander of soldiers in Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Missouri. Now, not a platoon, a battalion. I served in Congress for 8 years on the Homeland Security, Foreign Affairs, and Armed Services Committees. My experience in the military and in the halls of Congress have given me a deep understanding of the complex challenges our nation faces. In both roles, I've engaged with world leaders and been privy to highly classified intelligence. I know firsthand how essential, accurate, unbiased, and timely intelligence is to the President, to Congress, and to our warfighters, and the heavy cost of intelligence failures and abuses. Senator Collins, you led the creation of ODNI to address the intelligence failures of 9/11 and Iraq's so-called weapons of mass destruction. The need for the ODNI under strong leadership still exists today. If confirmed, I will bring my experience and fresh eyes to lead the intelligence community. Before I close, I want to warn the American people watching at home. You will hear lies and smears that challenge my loyalty and love for our country. Those who oppose my nomination imply that I am loyal to something or someone other than God, my own conscience, and the Constitution of the United States, accusing me of being Trump's puppet, Putin's puppet, and the lights went out. Hold on. My apologies. This is kind of what happens when you're Radio Shacking it. All right, let me accusing of me of being Trump's puppet, Putin's puppet, Assad's puppet, a guru's puppet, Modi's puppet, not recognizing the absurdity of simultaneously being the puppet of 5 different puppet masters. They used the same tactic against President Trump and failed. The American people elected President Trump with a decisive victory and mandate for change. The fact is, what truly unsettles my political opponents is I refuse to be their puppet. I have no love for Assad or any dictator. I just hate al-Qaeda. I hate that our leaders cozy up to Islamist extremists, calling them rebels. As Jake Sullivan said to Hillary Clinton, al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria. Syria is now controlled by al-Qaeda offshoot HTS, led by an Islamist jihadist who danced on the streets of 9/11 and was responsible for the killing of many American soldiers. If confirmed, and to add to what she's saying here, just recently, these Islamist groups that now have control of Syria are being referred to as rebels. Well, rebels rebel. Who are they rebelling against? Well, of course, that horrible dictator Assad. Now, I'm no friend of Assad's governmental policies by any means. And there were some things that would violate the United States' 10 First Amendments to the Constitution. However, the latest news reports I see out of New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, The Economist in England, all referring to these Islamic groups as rebels. And that's what she's saying here. I hate that our leaders cozy up to Islamist extremists, calling them rebels. As Jake Sullivan, to repeat what I said a minute ago, said to Hillary Clinton, al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria. Syria is now controlled by al-Qaeda offshoot HTS, led by an Islamist jihadist. Of course, he's changed his name, changed his appearance, cut his hair, shaved his beard, wearing a suit now instead of jihadist uniform, to fool as many people as possible, who was responsible for the killing of many American soldiers. If confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, I will continue to live by the oath of I have sworn at least 8 times in my life to support and defend our God-given freedoms enshrined in the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and I bear true faith and allegiance to the same. Thank you for your time. I look forward to your questions. Now, you know, you can see why they don't want her in there. Because if you can understand the Senate of the United States, most of the Senate of the United States is not your friend, and they're certainly not friends to the United States Constitution. A good many members of the House are not your friends, certainly not friends to the American Constitution. And when you get this kind of insidious rot showing up in the governmental halls of whatever nation you are in, where they're bought and sold 10 times over every few years, you understand the call for term limits. The founders discussed term limits. They didn't think it was a good idea. But to my knowledge, the military-industrial complex wasn't all that strong back in 1789. Anyway, I've talked about the Liars Bureau before. It's something put together by the LaRouche organization, and it's the LaRouche organization's battle to clean out the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, and other weaponized agencies, and on the need to nationalize the Federal Reserve. Now, you're always hearing about when countries finally get tired of colonialism from the British Empire or the American Empire or whatever empire, and they start nationalizing stuff. And so American industries, especially energy industries, who go in and start drilling the oil and pumping the gas, are always worried that the next military bully that shows up in control of the army will start nationalizing what these businesses have created. And the idea of nationalizing something always sounds kind of fascist or communist or whatever. The truth of the matter, almost everything in our country of large industrial expanse has essentially been nationalized through Wall Street's control of Congress and through the lobbying efforts of these businesses' control of Congress, that even though they are separate industries that file their tax returns for whatever they file, they're still under the thumb and control of who controls the money, who controls the credit. But the LaRouche organization has come out and called for the nationalization of the Federal Reserve, which may come as a surprise to some people who think that the Federal Reserve is federal. As you well know, of course, it isn't. It's just, you know, it's the European banking system that has absorbed the American banking system and exists as, ever since August of 1971, has existed as the Las Vegas attempt to control international credit, which is one of the reasons why we got to the point where we're at. Now, I said all of that to say this. The Liars Bureau is a publication of the LaRouche organization that is being now, it has been passed out, maybe still being passed out to all the members of Congress, both houses. And there was a symposium back on the 17th of January called Time to Root Out the Deep State Liars Bureau. So with President Trump's inauguration as president, this major brawl now has broken out over the confirmation of Gabbard and Patel. And a key part of the endless war policy of recent administrations has come in its organization as presentation to the American public, and how these various military and industrial complex people, whatever else, testify before Congress, do so in a fury of lies. And all the corruption of the various members of the administration, the previous administration, and the administration under Trump, and the administration under Obama, and the administration under George W., and the administration under Clinton, and the administration under George Sr., all the way back to Reagan. The lies, the corruption of the intelligence community has established what we now call the deep state. And so this dossier, the Liars Bureau, naming names, not just names, but all the evidence that goes with it that would suggest that these names, and as I said, the references, evidence that they're a part of this deep state, has got to have people scared to death whose names are on that list. Now, it's not like the blacklist that came out of Hollywood. It's not like, what's his name's list back in the 50s of communists in America. Of course there's communists in America. There's communists in our government, for Pete's sake. But what's important here is that the American people, I mean this, it's crucial not only to expose the past lies and the corruption and the interference in elections, but also to facilitate vital investigations today. As I was, Clapper, as I was given examples of Brennan and Clapper as directors of the CIA, how nothing was ever done once their lies were exposed. And Gabbard and Patel have confirmed could be key in carrying out the true investigations into the deep state. And they aren't going to do it in a month. They're not going to do it in 6 months. I don't know that they can do it in 4 years. But the American people deserve this now. And as she said, at the beginning of her comments, the lies, the obfuscations, the distortions, the smear that will be given to her, I don't know that any of that happened when Eisenhower, in 1960, was warning us. I was a mere lad of 9 years old, almost 10, of the military-industrial complex. I don't remember smears. There was probably a few editorials here and there that Eisenhower is maybe overstepping his or breaching his authority or something else. But today, what was back then a warning from Eisenhower is now a cancer that exists in probably all the various administrative departments of the federal government. So that's why I say that the next few days could be some of the most serious that we have faced since the election. Now, the first days of hearings for the confirmation of these two nominees turned out just as they were advertised, just as Tulsi Gabbard was warning. These contentious attacks from the defenders of the establishment, and which some of them were very, very clear on this. But both of them, I think, were very effective in rebutting the assaults that were directed at them. And these detractors, and it wasn't just Democrats, there were a couple of Republicans that could have been a little nicer, were just intent on defending the weaponization and the politicization of the agencies that are responsible for protecting the American citizens and upholding the Constitution. And their opponents on the committees, as I said, some Republicans, demonstrated in their attacks why these nominees are so drastically needed to reform the agencies that they will head, and why it's essential that the light of day shine inside the various secret departments of these agencies. In announcing in November why he selected them, remember he picked Patel and Gabbard back in November, right after the election. And he says there's something wrong with these institutions. He says these agencies don't function and need to be challenged and reconstructed. And he said that Gabbard and Patel were the kind of fighters who could get that done. And that part of his campaign 8 years ago was to clean up the rot that was in the deep state. The problem was the rot was in the West Wing of the White House, the rot was in Congress all over the place, the rot was in the intelligence community, the rot was in the Justice Department, the rot was in the military. And, well, he was overwhelmed because of his naivety. I don't know that he's so naive anymore. But the background to these hearings is, and what's happened since, is a virtual nonstop series of all these allegations against these two. And typical was an article that just came out in The Economist, which is the mouthpiece of the City of London And every time I mention the City of London, I also want to mention the fact that you know that the City of London is not London proper. It's the little 1 square mile area in the middle of London, sitting right here on the Thames, on the north side of the Thames, right next to the tower, in fact, in the Tower Bridge, as opposed to all of the other communities that surround it. I mean, if you can imagine, you know, just let's say the city of South Salt Lake as the city of London, the heartbeat of the British Empire, the home of MI6, the home of the Bank of England, these kinds of things. And then all the rest of the Salt Lake County cities surrounding it are like Camden and Kensington and Stockwell. I have to bring that up to your attention. One of the boroughs of London. And when you see something as important as The Economist, and it may be even more important coming out of the City of London than the New York Times coming out of Wall Street, another government unto itself. It's very important. So I'm quoting here, talking about the special relationship between the U.S. and the U.K. intelligence collaboration. On January 28th, a lengthy article charged that Gabbard was chosen to purge any employees of the 18 agencies she would command for being disloyal to the president. Now, she said she wasn't going to do that. She was asked that by the committee, but The Economist comes out and says that's why she's in there, as a part of Trump's revenge and vengeance against those who persecuted him 4 years ago, and all during the last 4 years. And it focused on 2 executive orders that have been issued by Trump since then, just a couple of weeks ago, which calls for the new director of national intelligence to undertake a sweeping review of the intelligence community's activity during Biden administration, to identify people who weaponized intelligence or interfered in domestic policies, and to take disciplinary action, including dismissal against the offenders. Now again, if you're one of those offenders, or you happen to be in a position of the Senate to vote the confirmation under control of one of those offenders, and everybody must owe somebody something in these positions, it's going to be tough for her to get in there. Now, the article on Patel that in The Economist that was published on the 29th, the day before the hearings, was far less polite. The article was titled, "Kash Patel is a Crackpot." I went to lunch or breakfast yesterday with a very, very dear friend of mine who essentially said the same thing. He must be reading the London Economist. And he just can't understand. He just can't understand. I could hardly get a word in edgewise. He just can't understand my support of Patel and Gabbard and what they represent. But anyway, it says Patel wore his animus toward the national security establishment, evident in his role as a leading investigator into violations of law involved in the long-running Russiagate campaign against Trump. And so the article, and as I'm telling you this, just put yourself in the shoes of those who don't want him in there, and you can understand why they don't want him in there if you don't already. It accuses him of taking every opportunity to exaggerate mistakes or faults by the intelligence agencies, with nary an admission that the mistakes and faults, including violations of law, which seriously tarnished the election of Trump, identifying him as a puppet of Putin, and disrupted his efforts to improve relations with Russia. So the article fails to mention, on the other hand, that those who are responsible for the intelligence failures, which have been widely acknowledged based on lies and to support a political bias, as evidenced accountability. Many senators, such as the new Senator Adam Schiff, who is on the committee deciding the fate of Patel, still repeat these lies at every opportunity. And you still hear Russiagate being brought up. So the assault on Trump's two is coherent with a report that came out of the House of Lords, released December back in 2018, called UK Foreign Policy in a Shifting World Order, which was warning that, and I quote, from the House. Now, you know, you have, in England, you have the Parliament, and above them they have the House of Lords. But the House of Lords has no voting power in Parliament. It's like a Senate without a vote. They're there to advise and consent. And the House of Lords is often made up as thank yous for political donations or behavior or support of various prime ministers or whatever else in the past, kind of get elevated to that. Or political people who just won't go away and die, kind of get elevated to the House of Lords. And the House of Lords published this thing called the UK Foreign Policy in a Shifting World Order. You bet it's shifting. Which warned that, quote, were Trump reelected in 2020, and this was published in 18, the president hadn't even been in there 2 years yet. Trump hadn't been in for 2 years. Were Trump reelected in 2020, the special relationship between the British and U.S. political and intelligence establishment would be threatened, if not ended. The special relationship is identified in the report as the means through which City of London operatives steer U.S. policy. You think Israel is steering U.S. policy. And the report asserts that it remains, quote, our top priority and cornerstone of what we wish to achieve in the world. And what they want to achieve in the world in this special relationship is that they share intelligence. The idea of special intelligence isn't just that the newly elected president can go kiss the backside of the reigning monarch in England, as has happened in the past. No sooner, Obama might be the most sterling example. No sooner was he elected or inaugurated that he was over there kissing Queen Elizabeth's backside. But this special relationship is far more important to the Brits than it is to America's sovereignty, because the Brits, the MI6 wants to know what CIA knows, and the CIA wants to know what MI6 knows, because they're hand in hand. The intelligence network background of the worldwide intelligence network that supports the rules-based order and the nations of the West, primarily Britain and the United States, as the controllers of the American hegemony. I pointed this out to my friend yesterday, and he just didn't want to believe that the Brits have that kind of power. And I said, hey, I admit they're fading fast into the West. The entire British army, the fighting army of the Brits, couldn't fill an NFL stadium. They have at least 2 aircraft carriers that can't get out of port. So they're not necessarily the military arm of the Western hegemony anymore. But they're still a very powerful influence in this special relationship that Trump has a time or two indicated he may not think it's all that special. And that's a very, very, very dangerous position to take, because central to this special relationship stuff and all these repeated violations of international laws, the wars, the regime change coups, the assassinations, which have dominated international relations ever since the assassination of Kennedy, from the war to Vietnam to the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq, and NATO's proxy war against the Russians in the Ukraine, are products of the application of this kind of political special relationship stuff, which the Anglo-Americans assert in their imperial right to rule the world, as was clearly spelled out in the Wolfowitz Doctrine, which was an offshoot as America being the sole superpower that Brzezinski talked about. And so these attacks that are launched against Gabbard, in particular, reflect adherence to unquestioningly loyalty to this ideological belief of the American hegemon and the rules-based order. That's why we have over 800 bases out there. Some people say 900, but I think it's a little less than that, to maintain this rules-based order. And which was evidenced to some degree the other day when, over the weekend, when Trump said, well, bomb those SOBs in Somalia. I don't know who it was, but they were in a cave. Now that's the first thing. The first thing I said, what? They hadn't learned from bin Laden? Were they also sitting on a yak inside of a cave in Somalia? So if you saw the pictures, I mean, it looked kind of like southern Utah, just kind of barren, hilly, with nothing green, all brown. And all of a sudden, these massive explosions, supposedly, allegedly hitting an underground cave. Well, I guess that's what a cave is, to take out these jihadist leaders. Well, the war hawks from both parties on the Senate committee accuse her, Gabbard, of placing her beliefs ahead of the assessments of the intelligence community. In other words, you're going to, and I used the upside down funnel the other day to, at the top of the open funnel is all the various, 21 agencies, 22 agencies, something like that, that gather intelligence. Gets into the funnel, gets sorted down to the little opening at the bottom that falls down on Tulsi Gabbard's desk as Director of National Intelligence. And what several members that were accusing her on her nomination was that she would use her own biases and her own political beliefs, religious beliefs, desire for revenge, whatever else, carrying the sword and shield of Trump vengeance when she decides what intelligence gets through to the president. That's when she made the dramatic statement, you're going to hear lies and rumors and all this stuff, but rest assured, it's the Constitution of the United States that is my guide. So she countered the quality of their nastiness against her, refuses to affirm, denying these false claims, saying something what she doesn't believe in for the sense of getting along, which was the inference that that's what's happened in these positions in the past. Excuse me. So if somebody were to say something they didn't like, just, or somebody, when pressed, for example, the best example I think of all is when she met with Syrian President Assad in 2017. She defended her decision, saying that she believes that it's necessary. I was just waiting for her to say you keep your friends close, but you keep your enemies closer, out of Godfather, but she didn't say that. She just kind of said she believes that it's necessary when possible to meet with those you disagree with before deciding to risk American lives by going to war, which is an unacceptable position to which, for those who defend the Biden administration's rejection of any diplomatic contact with Russian President Putin regarding the Ukraine. Well, we don't talk to those people. Or we don't talk to President Assad unless we're Assad's puppet. We don't talk to Putin unless we're Putin's puppet. And there's a certain portion of the American public that's stupid enough to believe that. So there was no response from the members of the committee when she pointed out her concern in Syria was that the Obama and the Biden policies as acted upon by Hillary Clinton and her successors of providing support for what was once jihadists, now rebels, in this regime change that could lead to a victory there by the ISIS and al-Qaeda terrorists, which has just occurred, except they're not terrorists anymore. our State Department, our military is referring to them as rebels. So in her opening statement, oh my goodness, the first hour is almost over. She quoted from an email, the one I said, where Jake Sullivan is telling Hillary Clinton back in 2012, Al-Qaeda's on our side in Syria. And so Sullivan, who served as National Security Advisor under Biden until, a week ago, was Clinton's deputy chief of staff when he wrote that email, having worked, as chief of staff, deputy chief of staff, working heavily in the West Wing under Clinton. See this whole nest? This is the deep state. So Gabbard has frequently defended the importance of verifying the assessments before approving action. Because she's alluding to the fact, look, you're getting an awful lot of bad intelligence here, as the president is now. When the president came out last week saying that Putin's losing, they're losing ground, they're losing their armed vehicles, over 1 million dead. And I thought, was that the Bee, the satirical paper, the Sacramento Bee, is that what it is, out of California? Was that what that was? No, the president seemed to be very serious with that comment. And then making some assertions of the character of Putin again. And I haven't even gotten, I'm holding to the next hour, Putin's recent description of Trump. So, she just reiterated this sense of don't you love being able to see things like this? Yeah, I mean, you don't have to agree with me. You certainly don't have to agree with me. I just think it's just so glaringly obvious. How do people miss this? So, in her opening comments, the sense of this sacred commitment, she said this: for too long, faulty, inadequate, or weaponized intelligence have led to costly failures and the undermining of our national security and God-given freedoms enshrined in the Constitution. The most obvious example of one of these failures is our invasion of Iraq, based upon a total fabrication or complete failure of intelligence. Then she goes on to talk about the cost of that. She said fabrication or complete failure of intelligence. Intelligence can fail, but fabricated intelligence? There has to be intent for it to be fabricated. What was the intent? Well, we know about the lies of the yellow cake from Niger, the yellow cake, uranium. Well, the list could go on, and I don't want to get distracted talking about that, because the fact that she implied that there was fabricated intelligence for the attack on Iraq. Again, you're sitting there beside her, and you're looking at the faces of the members of this Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. What are you seeing on the faces? You sit there, you're looking at the Democrats, to a man, to a woman, don't want her in there. You're looking at the Republicans, mostly who do, but some have questions, who want her in there. And she just got through saying that some of the intelligence that led to the invasion of Iraq was based on fabricated intelligence. And so the cost of the failure, she said, was the loss of thousands of American lives in Iraq, and the deaths of as many as 1 million Iraqis. And I think it was Madeleine Albright that confirmed the fact that over 500,000 Iraqi children were killed on fabricated intelligence. Will somebody pay for that? Now, I know it's the top of the hour, and if I was just doing a K-Talk broadcast, I would go ahead and go to the news. But what better source of news? I didn't really say that. It's just that this is such a very, very important time, today and tomorrow. I think tomorrow is when they're voting on Patel. I don't know if Tulsi Gabbard's tomorrow or Wednesday or whatever. But our national security and the integrity behind our national intelligence is being measured right now. What was the thing that was written on the wall? Meeny, meeny, tarkle, parson. You have been found, you've been measured and you've been found wanting, or something like that, the Hebrew story, the Old Testament story. So her implicit message, and the reason I'm concentrating on her so much is I was in love with her from comments she made earlier, but when I saw her sitting there, stoic, being slandered, rudely being treated by those who are scared to death she might get in that office, not because she's not competent, although that's their battle cry. They're scared to death of what she's going to reveal and thereby prosecute. She doesn't have prosecutorial powers, but the Department of Justice does, which is why they don't want Patel in there. So when she is calling out the analysts for the faked intelligence, the blatant hypocrisy when they were accusing her of undermining the authority of the experts by challenging their conclusions, especially the 51 intelligence specialists who knew for sure that the Biden laptop story was Russian Russian propaganda. Glenn Greenwald, in making comments, I like him. I think he might still be in Brazil, probably a good idea. But he's another one that, as far as journalists are concerned, he pointed out that the guardians of the status quo, that's a quote, guardians of the status quo, on that committee were visibly angered by her statement of the blatant hypocrisy when they accused her of undermining the authority of the experts. And which of course might cost Gabbard some very needed votes. Now, that happened at the end of last week, last Thursday. What happens, what's going on between, now this is me, I have no way of proving this, but this is what I believe. What goes on between her testimony before the committee and the actual vote? Who's talking to who? Who is coming back? You know, it's just like when she said she's going to overturn, you know, Article 720. She reversed her position on Article 720 of the Patriot Act, which allowed warrantless surveillance of Americans who might be doing business with foreign nationals. And at first she said she would never, ever do that. And then she reversed her position. And she's reversed her position on a couple other things that are affronts to the Fourth Amendment. And I asked Harley about that last week when he was on. And he wrote it off to, well, there's some compromising that needs to take place. So I'm offering this as evidence as to what might be taking place between Thursday's appearance before the Senate Select Committee and the actual voting, where she meets with these people who she knows does not want her in there, and is she making some concessions to get their vote? Because it's not just, what was it, half a dozen, 8 members, whatever, the Democratic members of the Senate Select Committee, who don't want her in there. And they may personally, man for man, woman for woman, admire her courage, her strength for standing up for the Constitution and the God-given freedoms enshrined in our Constitution, especially the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments. Well, at least all of them. I don't worry too much about the 3rd Amendment anymore, but the rest of them. And when she comes out and she said in a CNN town hall meeting before her appearance before the committee that the address that, you know, oh, in fact, it was her presidential campaign back in 2019 when she explained why she questioned all the findings that led to the Iraq War. She said, I served in a war in Iraq, a war which was launched on the basis of lies, and a war that was launched without evidence. So she says this, so as a soldier, as an American, as a member of Congress, it's my duty and my responsibility to exercise skepticism anytime anyone tries to send our service members into harm's way or use our military to go in and start a new war. Now, when you look at all the war talk, Senator Rubio, well, Secretary Rubio now, the horrible things he's saying about China just before the president's going to be meeting with Xi Jinping, I don't know how the president's going to backtrack some of that stuff. But it's just to a point where some of this stuff was secretive. Some of this stuff was hidden. I mean, that's why it's called the deep state and the shadow government, and because it's not out there in the light of day. And that's what she's doing. Before this Senate committee, she's lifting the corner of the carpet. Look what I found under here. I want to pull back the entire carpet where these secrets, these machinations, these traitorous behaviors against American Republican Constitution need to be brought to the light of day. I don't know who might be more of a target, Tulsi Gabbard or President Trump. But she concluded her statement by ridiculing the charges that she's a puppet of dictators and a puppet of the enemies of America, which have been aired, you know, I mean, the anti-Trumpers like Hillary Clinton and Dick Cheney. And then they asked her about another thing that I thought was really good, was the Snowden litmus test. This groupthink which shapes their opposition was exposed by their obsession with Edward Snowden, the former NSA intelligence contractor who back in 2013 leaked some documents which exposed an illegal global surveillance and data collection run by the National Security Agency. And she was asked repeatedly during the hearing to denounce Snowden as a traitor. And she declined. She wouldn't call him a traitor. And then you could see the furiousness that came over the face of some of those Senate members when she refused to do that. She said he broke the law. He exposed the spying done by the security state, but argued that what he exposed were egregious, illegal, and unconstitutional programs being carried out by the U.S. government, which deprived Americans of their right to privacy, especially the Fourth Amendment. And bringing this out, pointing out the fact, yes, he broke the law. He's not a traitor. He was working as a contractor. He wasn't a member of the military. He was just working as a contractor with top secret information granted. And he revealed the fact that the government was spying on Americans and Australians and a bunch of other people. American government was. And showing this contrast, this opposition to the fact he broke the law, but look, for Pete's sake, what he was able to reveal, substantiated by many experts since then, mind you, didn't evoke even a glimmer of recognition from her opponents. They just had these expressions of exasperated incredulity. I think I do that well. And then a further indication of the mindset of her opponents was their inability to detect the irony in a tweet that was sent out by Snowden when he heard about what was going on here. He sent out a tweet just before the Senate hearing. And he said this: Tulsi Gabbard will be required to disown all prior support for whistleblowers as a condition of confirmation today. I encourage her to do so. Tell them I harmed national security and the sweet, soft feelings of staff. In D.C., that's what passes for the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh. That's why I've admired a lot of the comments that have come out of Snowden's mouth. Yeah, he broke the law. And the law he broke is a very serious law. And if he ever gets back in the States, he may have to do some time for it. But just like Assange, look what they were revealing. And so she hasn't spoken out against Assange. She hasn't called Snowden a traitor. So she's sitting there before this committee. And the looks of incredulity that comes across the faces of the Democrats. So, you know, a very similar failure of the anti-Trump naysayers was their inability to discredit Patel, Kash Patel, for his role in exposing the corruption of the FBI officials in their false Russiagate attack on Trump. And I know I've spent a lot of time on Gabbard, but his insistence that he would focus as FBI director on correcting the abuses which led to Russiagate was largely ignored by the Democrats on the committee. They don't want to acknowledge what he said for fear of acknowledging the fact that Russiagate was an FBI operation against Trump, politicizing, militarizing, weaponizing the FBI to make sure Trump doesn't get in there for a second term. So you know when you're arguing with somebody and the other side makes a prescient point that you don't have an argument for, you ignore it and go on to something else. And that's what they did. So, you know, even in covering Patel's hearing, even the Washington Post said that he was mostly correct. The Washington Post, thank you, Jeff Bezos, that he was mostly correct in the way he pushed back against some of these charges by members of this committee. And the systemic fraud that underlying the Russiagate fable. And this is especially noteworthy as the Post, remember the Washington Post, got a Pulitzer Prize along with the New York Times in 2018 for what is now recognized as their false reporting on Russiagate. They got the Pulitzer Prize in 2018. So the fate of these two nominations obviously are still up in the air. And it's very possible that the Democrats on the committee will unanimously reject them. If one Republican senator on the committee votes with the Democrats, their nominations could be defeated, setting back Trump's efforts to reorganize U.S. intelligence and law enforcement. But this goes back to something that happened 50 years ago? 50 years ago this year, the Church Committee. The Church Committee, and I remember when this happened in 1975. I had 2 kids by then. I was interested in government, but trying to finish my undergrad, working full-time, married with 2 children. There wasn't a whole lot of time for much of anything except I listened to K-Talk back then. Just loved Bob Salter and several others. That's what turned me into a talk radio junkie. But I remember the church committee was established by congressional vote to investigate all these, the variety of all these allegations of the illegal activities, including the exposure of U.S. agencies that were involved in running covert operations, actions in these foreign countries, including the coups, the assassinations, the use of false flags to justify going to war like Vietnam, illegal surveillance of Americans in the anti-war civil rights movements that were going on called COINTELPRO, lies about the success of U.S. military operations and the involvement of CIA operatives in the Watergate scandal. CIA was right in the middle of Watergate. And ironically, and that's what the church committee exposed. Whatever happened as a result? Nothing. So ironically, the hearings on Gabbard and Patel occurred just 2 days after the 50th anniversary of the vote to create the church committee. And the work of the church committee was undermined by a campaign to discredit it, just as there has been a discredit of Trump's nominees under the assault by those who fear that they will be the targets of a very serious investigation, and they should be scared. Not because of the deceit, not because of the lying and the obfuscation and the changing and the altering of facts and intelligence, but tens of thousands of American soldiers have died, and Marines and airmen and Navymen as a result of this false intelligence. So a release of these documents by the National Security Archives, which is kind of, you know, when Martin Luther went to the church there in Germany and nailed his stuff on the door. I don't remember what number 1 was, but I can just see the members of this intelligence select committee seeing Gabbard and Patel, a list of what is going to be done as the targets of serious investigation if they get into these positions. So a release of these documents from the National Security Archives, which has already started to come out, shows the need for another church committee. And under the headline, this was from the recent archives, advisors to President Ford sought to protect CIA's image abroad. It identifies the strategy employed to withhold sensitive intelligence spearheaded by Dick Cheney. That was one of the first pillars of what the church committee was after. And it's the same Dick Cheney who was directly involved with, as vice president in the fake intelligence to justify George W. Jr.'s Iraq war. And then he resurfaced, you know, I hadn't heard from him in a while. He resurfaced lately with his daughter, an anti-Trumper, old Liz, to denounce the choice of Gabbard as DNI, chairman of DNI. And so the continuity of these networks that got us into Vietnam, that got us into Iraq, that got us into Afghanistan, that is keeping us in Syria, threatening Ukraine, threatening Iran, is the same network of conspiratorialists who are in there that were in there as juniors sitting on the back row of some Senate committee, eventually members of the Senate committee, and now advisors to the Senate committee, the same purulent rot. And so outflanking them to some degree was this executive order by the president to declassify all the remaining documents related to the assassinations of the Kennedy brothers, King, and Malcolm X. I can't remember if there's anybody else, but if confirmed as DNI, Tulsi Gabbard would have oversight of the process of this declassification. with the potential to dismantle the International Assassination Bureau that this group represents, if it still continues to this day. But in part by the work of the Church Committee in September 1976, the House set up the House Select Committee on Assassinations. What were you doing in 1976? Anyway, the House Select Committee on Assassinations to investigate the killings of John Kennedy and Martin Luther King. And in its summary, the committee concluded that it believes, on the basis available to it, that President John F. Kennedy was probably assassinated as the result of a conspiracy, which was the first time any official political body suggested it was more than just a lone gunman. So the committee was unable to identify any other gunman or the extent of the conspiracy. Again, here's an effort of a particular group trying to look clean, trying to look like they're honest with the American people by just barely lifting the corner of the carpet. Yeah, as I look under the carpet here, it looks like there might have been a conspiracy, but we can't find another conspirator. And so the work of the House Committee on Assassinations confirmed the belief of many Americans that these assassinations were the result of a conspiracy and were covered up by the officials of the U.S. government agencies. But until now, and still now, there has been no accountability for it whatsoever. And it's long overdue that the truth finally comes out. Now here is, in August 17th, 1975, Senator Frank Church from Idaho appeared on NBC News, Meet the Press, and discussed the National Security Agency and issued this warning. Now, it's very short. It's about 3 paragraphs. But I want you, as I read this to you, I want you to hear it in the sense of what Tulsi Gabbard is facing. So, and this was on NBC News' Meet the Press. Quote, "In the need to develop a capacity to know what potential enemies are doing, the United States government has perfected a technological capability that enables us to monitor the messages that go through the air." This is 1975, 50 years ago. He said the technology existed then to monitor the messages that go through the air. Now just think about that for a minute. What technology did we have back then that could monitor the messages going through the air? Now don't think about today yet. Don't think about what's circling the earth in hundreds of these little devices up there constantly monitoring transmissions. Don't think of it in that sense. But in 1975, we had the technology to monitor what goes through the air. Now he goes on. Now this is necessary and important to the United States as we look abroad at enemies or potential enemies. We must know at the same time that capability at any time could be turned around on the American people. And no American would have any privacy left. Such is the capability to monitor everything. Telephone conversations, telegrams, it doesn't matter. There would be no place to hide. Again, this is 50 years ago. If this government ever became a tyranny, if a dictator ever took charge in this country, the technological capacity that the intelligence community has given the government could enable it to impose total tyranny. And there would be no way to fight back because the most careful effort to combine together in resistance to the government, no matter how privately it was done, is within the reach of the government to know. Such is the capability of this technology. I don't want to see this country ever go across the bridge. I know the capacity that is there to make tyranny total in America. And we must see to it that this agency and all agencies that possess this technology operate within the law and under proper supervision so that we never cross over into that abyss. That is the abyss from which there is no return. End quote. Frank Church, August 17th, 1975. I don't remember this. back then. I remember the church committee, and I remember discussions that were going on to a very limited degree in the political economy of Utah at the time. It was discussed on K-Talk Radio. And K-Talk Radio was probably the leader in this kind of information back then, as it has been for many years, in getting this kind of information out to the public. But this stark warning from Frank Church that the technology existed in 1975 to monitor everything. Where are we today? What are we capable of today? What is there that exists today that didn't exist back then, in the sense of monitoring what's going on? Well, you've heard about OneClick, this software that was developed in Israel with American help, that all it has to do is be near, I suspect, any Wi-Fi, be near any digital source of information, telephones, emails, texting, whatever else, and can read what's on that device without having to get a password to get into it. In other words, if someone was sitting here on the couch behind me and they had the OneClick software, while in the hour and a half that I've done this show, they could have read they could have opened up and searched every one of my emails without me giving them the password to my Gmail or my other email sources. They could have gone through my phone and looked at text messages without me knowing about it or giving them the password to my phone or anything else. Now, the intelligence operatives wanted to bring that into America's intelligence network, and Biden said no. He said absolutely not. Now, I think I would like to be able to pat our former president on the back as standing up for the Fourth Amendment, but no, of course not. He didn't want his stuff exposed. Yeah, you're right. I know you're laughing about how obvious the reason is as to why Biden said absolutely not. So they stuck it in a garage in Maryland, and as far as I know, it's still sitting there. But maybe it isn't. Because no matter how bad you think things are, it's 10 times worse. It's always been that way. All right, now I want to go on with some, I think I'm done with that. I looked and looked and looked for the phone numbers of the offices in Washington to call of people who might be wavering, because it only takes a couple on the Republican side to stop these confirmations. And what will you get in its place? After you've seen the sterling, stunning quality of integrity offered by these two people, Gabbard and Patel, what would come in behind them? Something that would pass. And what position would they have to take in order to pass the committee that ground these two up and spit them back out? Hopefully, it'll be the other way around. Now, I'm trying to create a commercial that I can play between the two halves of this. Oh, we've only got a half an hour left. Of what I don't get paid for this. None of the hosts at K-Talk get paid for what they're doing. They're doing this out of their desire to see the establishment of truth as we understand it. And there's a lot of different viewpoints, as there should be. There is a certain diversity at K-Talk. But I have a business to run, and I have bills to pay. And so I have been asked to speak at a conference the first week of, I'm speaking at a 3-day conference the end of this month in Phoenix, teaching what I do. I've been asked to speak at a conference in San Diego first week in May, on concussions and using patients that I take care of for concussions, case studies involving these people, and how the work that I do has been able to quickly return proper brain function, cognizance, memory, alertness to those who have suffered not just a concussion, but multiple concussions. And some of the sequelae that follow that, migraines, headaches, neck pain and stiffness, back pain, sciatica, not to mention internal organ problems for lack of proper nerve innervation because of the spinal misalignment. Excuse me. And because of the success we've had, word kind of gets around. We have more patients making appointments, or at least consultations, based on ongoing problems from earlier concussions, that some of these people that I've taken care of within 2-3 visits, I mean, they're crying in gratitude that they have their lives back because of the seriousness of the work that we do. So my consultations are free. Takes about 30 minutes. You want me to take care of you, there'll be a charge from that point on. If you don't want me to take care of you, or somebody you know that you think belongs in the office, we'll still be friends. But a significant percentage of the people we take care of come from out of state because of the reputation this kind of work has in restoring central nervous system function. So if you can get more information at forbiddendoctor.com, you can call the office, 801-523-1890 for a consultation, or you can pass that information on to somebody else. I will have a video on there, hopefully by the end of the month, that goes into detail as to what we do structurally to the spine that has been able to restore life to so many people in the fewest of visits. Very gentle. The work I do is extremely gentle. You hardly even know I'm doing anything until you stand up and walk around, and then you know something happened. And it's difficult for people to describe or explain to their friends what it is they went through, because nobody's ever experienced this till you experience it. It's been around for decades. There's just not a whole lot of people who do this. There's only 2 of all the chiropractic colleges, of which there's an increasing number almost every year. I don't think it'll be long before there's one in Utah. There's only 2 of those colleges that actually teach the upper cervical work that I do. And there's a good reason why, but I'm not going to go into that. So in the half hour, I just wanted to mention those things. The website's forbiddendoctor.com. The phone number is 801-523-1890. We just went through a big special this month in January. I've got new patients to see this week. There's always room for more. I always tell the ladies, Hannah and Trudy, don't turn anybody down because we're scheduled. Make a hole for them. Make a hole and get them in there. They've suffered long enough. All right. Now, the world is, in the remaining half hour here, the world is clearly in a state of absolute tension, trying to evaluate what's going to happen out of the new Trump administration for the world, first on the perspective of peace, and then on the perspective of not peace, such as the bombing of these Islamists here over the weekend. And today, of course, the big day, I saw a picture with a meme that says the President of the United States arriving in Washington, and it's a picture of Netanyahu walking down, I thought that was very apropos, walking down the stairway off of the airplane, off of their version of their presidential jet or whatever, I don't know. Anyway, the signs and the signals that continue to come out of Trump's mouth is so contradictory. And so while there are positive signs, you know, not the least with the nomination of Gabbard and Patel for respective posts, in the hearings, I mean, the larger crisis points are still waiting some kind of resolution, whether or not these two get into those offices. I fear for our republic, or at least the return of our republic. I don't know that we have a republic now, but the return of the republic, I fear for it if these two do not get into those offices. But concerning the situation in the Ukraine, Kirill Budanov of Ukraine, who is the head of the CIA of Ukraine, the Directorate of Intelligence or whatever, said something which was quite unique and new coming out of a high official in the Ukraine. And namely that unless there's some very serious negotiations by summertime, he said, there's a danger that the Ukraine is going to lose its existence as a state, which is an existential threat. So if Ukraine signals a willingness to negotiate, and President Putin also said that he's ready to negotiate, I think one could assume that Trump's intention to resolve this conflict quickly still remains a possibility. But when the head of intelligence in the Ukraine says, hey, you know, and then Zelensky, the damn fool that he is, out there running around, and now the intelligence is telling us half, if not more than half, of all the money, all the armament, everything we've sent over there is out on the streets for sale to in the armed business of selling the stuff, you know, under secretive transactions in the military black market out there, selling all this equipment, these bombs, these bullets, these ATACMS, everything else. You got that on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's absolutely mandatory that the security interests of Russia, which simply is Ukraine not in NATO, and the security guarantees of other various forms, that has to be upheld, or there will be no discussion. Anyway, there's a silver lining on the horizon that this horror situation may soon come to an end. Some negotiated peace may be possible, hopefully before the end of March, before too many more of these 18-year-olds that are being drafted now into the Ukrainian army are slaughtered within hours after arriving on the front line. I remember a year ago when Scott Ritter was saying that. He said the life expected, or it may have been McGregor, doesn't matter, the two guys are step for step for the most part with each other's opinions. But one of them was saying that the life expectancy of a newly arrived Ukrainian soldier to the front line was 4 to 5 hours. And I had lunch on Saturday afternoon with someone I hadn't seen in a long time and kind of catching up on things. And I said, have you seen the videos of those drones that run down the soldiers? You know, a drone that's no bigger than the drone you could go over to Best Buy and pick up for $200 or $300. And they carry an explosive device on it. And it has a camera. And that camera is being surveilled by an overhead satellite. And so who's ever controlling, and they have to be there on the ground in proximity because the controller has a certain range to the drone. But because of the camera, they can find who they're looking for or something they're looking for, a soldier in hiding or a soldier coming out of a tank or something, and drill the drone right in on the soldier, and it has a proximity explosion. It doesn't actually have to hit them. It just has to get very near them. And it's a grenade or something else. Can you imagine being on the front line and those kinds of things looking for you? I mean, there goes trench warfare. There goes the bunkers. There's no place to hide from these things. And so when I was explaining that to my friend, he couldn't believe that kind of thing existed. Well, how much time do you spend studying this stuff? Of course you don't believe it. Of course this is new to you. You're not familiar with this. Well, just as that escapes the understanding of a lot of Americans, so does what's going on in the Middle East escape the understanding of a lot of Americans. And then Trump has basically repeated his initial proposal to relocate all the Palestinians from Gaza to Egypt, to Jordan, even to Indonesia, which was rejected by all of these governments. And it's obviously not upheld in the interest of the Palestinians because this is their home. They don't want to leave. And despite all the incredible suffering that had been inflicted on the Palestinians, the concept of samud, steadfastness, and the idea of holding on to their land, even if it's covered with rubble and debris. And if you've seen some of these pictures of Gaza, well, it looks like Dresden. It looks like Hamburg after the bombing raids. Maybe even worse. And so many people, I mean, the big question is what's going to happen next? The ceasefire phase 2 in operation. Will the fighting reconvene in what is happening in the West Bank, where the Israeli government wants to get rid of the title West Bank and call it Judah and Samaria, and then go ahead and take it as their property? Many people are saying that there's a repetition of what happened in Gaza going on in the West Bank. But what's going to be the solution put on the table for the Gaza peace? It's one thing for a ceasefire. You've got to come in behind it with some kind of, a Marshall Plan or something. You have to come in there. You can't just stop shooting. Now, I think it's very clear that Hamas has won the war. Hamas ran Israel out of there. And the idea of the demands that Netanyahu is making on Hamas, the Palestinian Authority, and others, and his appearance, he's probably still in meetings with Trump right now. I don't have access to the news, so I don't know what's going on. But why did he come now in the middle of, I think, the phase 2 of this peace thing, when it was Hamas that ran the IDF out of Gaza? Now, some people don't agree with that description, but there's a lot of people in the know who do. And what are you going to come in behind the peace agreement to establish peace? Well, the International Peace Coalition, again, is pushing the Oasis Plan that would be a general economic development for the entire region, starting with the production of just rivers of fresh water for irrigation for eventually the entire region. And naturally going along with the two-state solution and the whole question of a permanent peace. And what is the big big question right now is what is behind President Trump's plan to relocate 1.5 million Palestinians? Number one, that's in violation of the Geneva Convention to relocate a population against their will. But is it the plan that was issued for the first time by Netanyahu in May of 2024, called the Plan Gaza 2035, the transformation of the Gaza Strip? And I remember talking about this last summer, which was published by the Jerusalem Post and other various publications, where you could see these animations of skyscrapers and luxury buildings and golf courses and oases. No reference to the authority of the Gaza Strip, which would nominally be the Palestinian Authority, and no reference to a two-state solution. You know, it's just turning Gaza into a desert oasis of luxury and investment. The kind of thing that Kirshner, the president's son-in-law, has been pushing. And what was emphasized was turning, what could have been an east-west trade route Historically, Gaza has been located in an area, a very unique position in terms of a Baghdad-Egypt trade route, with Yemen and Europe being part of that trade route. But we'll find out what happens with Netanyahu's ideas after his discussions with Trump. I think the secret will be lifted then what their actual plans are, especially as far as the continued ceasefire is concerned, and whether or not they're acceptable. I mean, Trump is also going to discuss with Netanyahu, obviously, the fate of Lebanon and what's going on with Iran. This is extremely important. No one, people always, all people say about this is that Trump has promised no new wars, and we're going to end the wars we have, and we're not going to start any new ones, I think is what he said. And I think there was also some recognition that Iran should be negotiating with the International Atomic Energy Agency, overseeing the process of making sure that Iran doesn't have a weapon. But, trying to figure out what the actual plans are, and this proposal, like rebuilding Gaza for these luxury buildings and these trade route hubs, is somewhat, I think, linked to the famous NEOM, N-E-O-M plan in Saudi Arabia, which was a rather strange idea of building a ski resort in the desert, which doesn't seem to be a top priority of the region. But, the Oasis plan is the only thing that makes any sense. When you look at the entire map of this area of the world, from India to the Mediterranean, from the Caucasus to the Persian Gulf, you have to look at this entire region as one thing. And there has to be a peace solution, uplifting the populations of these war-torn regions, brought about by the very agencies that don't want Patel or Gabbard to get into these intelligence positions. You have Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Lebanon, West Bank, Gaza, all of these regions extremely tortured and destroyed for many, many years of war. Something has to be done for the population, not just for the upper crust. And the whole situation is very much in flux. I think the Europeans aren't quite clear what they're going to do. They're in this huge battle in the EU between those who favor rapprochement with Russia and China versus those who are on a complete warpath with Russia and China. NATO against Russia. Mark Rudy Tooty, the new Secretary General of NATO, is still talking about how Europe must become war ready and that they should be spending 5% of their budgets for military expenditures, and that NATO has to be prepared for war with Russia in no less than 4 to 5 years. This is completely ludicrous because it's based on narrative, not on the facts. Like in Poland, for example, pupils in grade school in the first years are now supposed to be learning how to shoot a rifle for the coming war in grade school. Now, I have no trouble with boys and girls in the 5th and 6th grade under proper instruction who want to go hunting with their parents or whatever else, being taught gun safety. Whether they're going to go hunting or just to have a good knowledge of being safe with these dangerous weapons, I think it's a good idea, but that's not what's going on in Poland. These kids are being taught how to shoot human beings in a war with Russia. Completely insane. And there's a vote in the German parliament on the question of whether of the new law regarding the migrant issue. This is, it's like here, trying to get the horses back in the barn. Boy, that's a hard thing to do once the barn's on fire. Now, I was watching the news this morning and seeing the new Secretary of Governor Noem down on the border And how the Border Patrol is just elated that she's in the position she's in, and that the Border Patrol is now be able to do the job they wanted to do, and that there are certain members of the Border Patrol who were members of the Border Patrol under the first administration of Trump. All right. And that they're there now. They've been there all along, and now they can get their job done. And that's probably a discussion for tomorrow. But is Europe going to go in the direction of rapprochement with Russia over the Ukraine, having some kind of peaceful recognition with the BRICS countries? Or is Europe going to be in a war mode no matter what Trump does? So I think one of the things here in the last few minutes that differentiates between things that are really important and things that are of a secondary nature, somehow, funnily enough, pertains to the issue which was raised earlier, to some of the thinking of LaRouche, because he developed a method of thinking that isn't that difficult to understand, regardless of what Tom Daschle said. It's not some doctrine. It's not the LaRouchian doctrine. It's a method. And the method is that you have to think in terms of the laws of the universe. I mean, the issue of good and bad, regarding some activity or some statement or some proposition or some policy, you know, the bottom line here, when governments are doing something inside their sovereign borders, or they're doing something with a neighboring sovereignty or foreign sovereignty, is what they're doing contributing to the benefit of mankind, or is it against the benefit of mankind? That's the LaRouche method. Because if you don't have a guideline to measure what it is you're doing, your policies and your directives, your investments, your loans, you're going to end up in conflicts by another empire trying to take your empire away from you. And don't think for 1 minute that these rebels, so-called rebels in Syria, aren't there to reestablish the caliphate. Of course they are. Only this time they're going to do it. They learned from Western policies to do it with a three-piece suit and a tie and a white shirt instead of waving guns around. Oh, did you notice? Did you notice when the Israeli hostages were released here, the last group of them, how healthy looking they were? In fact, they were a little pudgy. But the Hamas soldiers that were bringing them up onto the stage, and here they are, and now they're being released, weren't waving. They were wearing their uniforms, and they had their faces covered for obvious security reasons. But they weren't waving their guns all over the place and acting like a bunch of idiot adolescent yahoos with too much testosterone. Their guns were pointed downward, not upward. Now, I'm not praising them. I'm just saying this is different. This whole idea of this insurgency that has moved in to take over Syria, which will eventually take over Lebanon. And as I said many times, I think the next target is Turkey, not Iran, because Iran has a nuclear weapon. Don't kid yourself. Just as Israel has them, Iran's got a nuclear weapon, and they have the ability to deliver it, which I think is what's holding off the attack, and one of the reasons why Netanyahu's talking to Trump today. But Hamas has won the war in Gaza, and they're changing their image to not look like I said, a bunch of yahoos, but also the so-called rebels, these Islamist terrorists, who we now call rebels in Syria, are doing the same thing to change their image so that what they're doing has a good intention behind it, because they got rid of that old SOB Assad. And you can see the perverted way right now in which all these things are unfolding. And the same thing that is going on in Germany with MERS coming to the fore, and where that's going to lead. Now, I just picked this up. This is just over the weekend from the Washington Post. Coverage of the nomination hearing of Gabbard as director of DNI included a report on her consultation with MIT weapons expert Dr. Ted Postel regarding the accusation that the Syrian government had used chemical weapons against its civilian population. This is one of the things that the committee didn't like about her because she didn't believe it. And I remember when it came out, I was doing, 5-day-a-week early morning broadcast at K-Talk. I didn't believe it either. But regarding this accusation that Assad had used chemical weapons on the town of Khan Sheikhun, Postel in the Washington Post, just here the Friday or Thursday or Friday, said this: months after the attack had released preliminary research suggesting that the use of chemical weapons in Syria had been staged by opposition forces. So Postel, who's one of the leading experts on nuclear weapons, has testified at several meetings organized by the Schiller Institute on the extreme danger of nuclear weapons. He said this: the interactions, which included in-person and virtual briefings, help explain her contrarian views of atrocities in Syria, talking about Gabbard, including past statements expressing doubt that the regime's responsibility for the use of poison gas. Now, he himself has been a focus of Post's central target as well. They denounce him as a conspiracy theorist, and they said this: Postel, who became emeritus at MIT in 2014, is an unusual interlocutor for a would-be director of national intelligence. A physicist with training in nuclear engineering, he worked for the Pentagon in the early 1980s before gaining prominence as an outspoken critic of its defense technologies. He has uncovered flaws in anti-missile plans, errors in analysis conducted by esteemed scientific bodies. His own research, however, has drawn fervent criticism for what some see as significant mistakes in studies of topics ranging from Israel's Iron Dome to North Korean missiles to nerve agents in Syria. They continue. Gregory D. Koblenz, director of the Biodefense Graduate Program at George Mason University's Scar School of Policy and a government and a former student of Postel's at MIT, called the professor a discredited conspiracy theorist in a letter transmitted to the Senate Intelligence Committee, which is scheduled to question Gabbard at a public hearing Thursday. The Post also quotes the notorious British intelligence liar apparatus, Bellingcat. The Post says of Gabbard, quote, her embrace of dissident narratives illustrates her distrust of the intelligence establishment she could soon oversee, as well as her willingness to entertain, elevate unconventional views. Who else would you want in there? Do you want somebody in charge of the intelligence committee, the intelligence network for America's security? Oh, yeah, sure. Oh, yeah. No, don't worry. Hey, we got it. You know what? I'm not at liberty to tell you everything before this committee right now. Don't worry about it. We got it covered. We have it taken care of. Don't worry. And then she kind of looks over at the Democratic side of the committee and winks at him. Don't worry, we got this covered. You're all right. You're safe. Be that as it may. I had fun. I had fun with this today. I intend on having fun with this tomorrow. You're going to be going to news here in a moment at the top of the hour at K-Talk. And if you don't get the station ID, this is K-Talk AM, 1640 AM, Sandy, Salt Lake, Ogden. And then I will shut down the stream. There it goes. Looks like things are running. So here, as far as the stream is concerned, thank you all for listening. If you like this, it wouldn't hurt to share this. I know it's long, and I know I said I want to put in some shorter pieces. I haven't got around to that yet, but I will. But I definitely appreciate your listenership and being a part of the program. And I will be back again tomorrow morning at about 5 or 6 minutes after the top of the